Welcome, everyone. We're going to be here together talking about Chapter 4, Emergent Reading, presented by SETC, the Special Education Tech Center, and talking about this book, Comprehensive Literacy for All by Karen Erickson and David Copenhaver. Well, we're going to be talking about Emergent Reading and then also talk about a little bit of Chapter 12. We know that we have multiple different types of learners in our classroom. And so how do we go and put emergent learners and conventional learners together? We believe in this group as we are learners together tonight that everyone can learn to read and write. We're going to be presuming that potential. We're looking at the act of, not the act of writing or reading, but really that process of learning. We're modeling. That's what good teachers do. We do that with reading and with writing, with AAC, modeling aided language simulation. We're always looking at providing access. How are we going to do that? Providing meaningful opportunities for all the things that we teach and accepting then all forms, right? Accepting all reading, accepting all writing, all communication attempts, and then we're always going to celebrate to provide that meaning and teaching, because that's what we're here for, right? So we're going to kind of we go back every week, every time we meet together to talk about Scarborough's reading rope, which I really like this image because it really talks about how that reading and writing, right, everything is so tied together. And so we're just pulling apart those threads a little bit, and we're looking at some of these individual pieces. And so what I love about comprehensive literacy is that it really looks at that upper strand, right? So we're going to be talking more about that upper strand and language comprehension with a little bit of that lower strand kind of thrown in. So if you have your general education teachers are also doing this kind of work with reading, then you're all set. So, okay. Exactly. I mean, we're going to have classrooms with kids that have complex communication needs with complex bodies. We're going to have kids that don't have complex bodies, but have complex communication needs. We're going to have, we accept all learners that come into our room. And so we have to have a lot of strategies, and that can be really challenging and really hard. So how do we go about that? And very thoughtful as we went through. So we're gonna go through this super fast. So what we learned so far, I love this picture, my friends. So there's no prerequisite to reading other than breathing, right? We want to make sure that everyone has access to literacy and how important that is. We understood in Chapter 11 that once we know better, we do better. And we know that picture-supported text, symbolating text, really takes away from learning to read rather than adding to for a while there, right, Heidi? I mean, how many books did you make?
Oh, we all did it.
Yeah, we all did it.
We all
Yeah,
did it.
we all, like I'm guilty as well. We all did it, and now we just got to stop it. So, just our soapbox for that. In Chapter 12, we talked about organizing and delivering that. And I really loved this, that comprehensive instruction delivered imperfectly is better than perfect instruction is one area. And I know for me, that was really an important lesson, but it was still hard. It's hard for me to not do something really well for my students,
Well,
but
and
they
I
don't
think,
have time, right? They don't have time for us to figure it out. Like, we need to just get in there and do it.
well, and the thing on this one I wanted to share is, in our district, we're doing Retopia for our upper
Mm.
elementary and through high school. And there's been so much research. There've been some new studies that have come out that they've done that just talk about, even if you're delivering part of it and not doing the full allotted amount, the 90 minutes a day, they're recommending that you still see progress, and that if you stop, if they end up with a year where the teacher is not familiar with it, and then they stop, that they regress. So even just like a little bit,
Mhm.
they make progress. And we've seen some really cool progress with students with emergent literacy skills so far this the last 2 years. So I'm super excited about where our students are going with that. So even if you can only do like one piece of it, that's better than doing no pieces of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I started, I took three pieces, right? I felt that that was manageable for me. And, I wish I could have done more, but, that's where I started. And at least my kids got three pieces. So, there's no judgment. The point is that we're trying, the stuff is, I mean, I had been a 22-year veteran of teaching. I had been doing it very differently until I read this book. And then it just went, and I changed everything almost overnight. And it was hard. It's not easy, it's hard, but
Mhm.
it was necessary, and my students benefited from that. So um yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I wish I could do 90 minutes. I don't know anybody out there who has 90 minutes to do it. So that's tough. There's just some realities that are built in. So good to know. Chapter 3, we looked at alphabet instruction, and these words for me still in the book are the most important words ever. Like,
Mhm.
you say it to yourself, why I say it out loud. Like, you can use it with everything, right? So
Yep.
any type of instruction, any type of thing where you have a complex communicator that is, or hopefully is using some AAC, right? And they what does that say to them? It says, like, if I say it to myself and while you say it out loud, it says, I believe in you. I know you're
Yep.
gonna be here, right here with me, right? And that is like walking the walk of presuming potential, right? And presuming that competence.
Well, and I think I read a book called Chatter, and it talks about the importance of self-talk. And we all
Mhm.
have self-talk. Our students who don't speak still have self-talk. And so harnessing
Yeah.
that, and sometimes our self-talk is really good, and sometimes our self-talk is just really pretty mean to ourselves. So um, but harnessing, teaching them that they can use their self-talk to learn and be able to kind of walk their way through kind of problem solving some things, from a cognitive perspective, that their bodies just aren't able to, all the time do, is like harness
Right.
that self-talk and really teach them to use it in a really positive, powerful way.
Right. And we need to practice that. We need to give that
Mhm.
space and that time, right? To be able to do that and to practice that shushing of us, which for me is really hard because I love to talk, but shushing and giving wait time, I mean, it's just even built into this sentence, right? I love, love, love this sentence. So, okay, what we learn in chapter 10? This was the one I couldn't be there for chapter 10, Heidi, and you took it away. So we were talking about
Oh
decoding.
gosh, my brain is like,
It's okay.
that
I
feels
know, I'm
like a
like, what
lifetime
is
ago.
chapter 10? Let me quick open up my book and find out what chapter 10 is. So chapter 10 was, well, we're looking at decoding and word identification. So rather than the phonological awareness, going into that
Yep.
word work. Yeah.
The area that I feel is definitely my weakness. So hence I'm not jumping in with anything really quickly here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's read this. So what we know then plus what we know now equals changing how we teach. Well, I mentioned that earlier, right? And I think it is
I just,
hard when
yeah.
you're working with a child that has complex communication needs and is an emergent learner, and still working with that decoding and still working with that
Mm-hmm.
rhyming and doing all those things. We still know we need to do that work. And so that we talked a lot in that chapter about what are some things that we can do,
Well,
mostly
and
with our
definitely like,
conventional learners. Go ahead.
mhm. Well, the other thing, talking about the importance of making sure that they have the whole alphabet, because
Oh
the
yeah.
alphabet is like the most robust AAC system that they can have, and so teaching that letter, some of those kind of skills are just really the decoding, word identification, and spelling. If we can get them to be even like first letter spellers, where they get
Yeah.
like the first letter of the word is you with their word prediction can kind of get pretty much what they're going to say probably 70 to 80% of the time, and that's really
Mhm.
powerful.
Super powerful. I mean, the fact that we have, a symbolic communication devices that we have now that are dynamic and robust and relatively inexpensive and accessible relatively, but we still can't say everything we want, right? We just can't. There's not enough real estate in the devices to hold that. So we need to have access to letters. We need to have access to that so that and the process of what that looks like in creating meaning from words. So yeah. All right, chapter 7. We talked, chapter 7 was talking about reading comprehension with our learners that are more of, so not emergent, right? But more of those conventional learners. They've moved out of that emergent reading and are more conventional. However, I see this, I think of this in terms, even when I'm thinking about our emergent learners, which we're going to be talking about tonight, right? So emergent reading, but looking at that comprehension, um, inferencing, I learned a lot about that inner sentence inferencing, right? That connecting ideas and that gap filling, which is information that's not in the text. And but that is really like this is the ultimate purpose of reading is that getting that deep understanding and learning something from the text. So really good stuff. We also, oh, I didn't pause them. Sorry. Pause. Thought I had done that. So anchor, read, apply, and gave some examples of how you want to anchor, some examples of how you read, right? And this was an example of like a second and third read, not the first through read. And then applying, right? Like, so doing that, providing that purpose, providing informative feedback, being able to check for that understanding. Woo! I feel tired. That was a lot of chapters that we just went through, and I'm proud. It was like 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Not
you guys,
We did
you're
well.
doing awesome.
It's a lot of stuff. So everybody should put their hand up high, tap themselves on the back. I see Janice already has her hand on her shoulder. Give it a little tap, Janice. Like, that's amazing. We have done a lot of work, and you being here is just a testament of how we're going to extend our learning even more. So, Heidi, emergent reading.
Oh, so much fun. So what I love about emergent reading, I think the really great reminder, it's basically, all of those behaviors that we learn to be a reader. If you look on page 50, there's like a bullet list, and it talks about all the things an emergent reader, we're trying to teach them with emergent reading. And that's like why we read, background knowledge and concepts, developing understanding of concepts about print, phonemic awareness, identifying some concrete words, some letters, names, and sound, and a desire to read. And I think about, I think of like trainings that we do, like in our district. We have a training coming up in March, and it's about literacy. And I know it's going to be all about conventional literacy, and there's
Mhm.
not going to be anything for our special ed teachers who are really struggling with some of those kids who come to us at an emergent level, because in school the way we're set up is we expect them to come into kindergarten like as emergent and then quickly start to develop into conventional readers. And we have so many of our students who, because of physical, medical, um, family socioeconomic needs, don't get those initial literacy touches that
Yeah,
our typically developing peers get. And so sometimes we have to back up and go back to that. Okay, I'm going to start at emergent so that they can see themselves be successful, so they learn to love to read. Because if we, jump right in and which we frequently do, bypass that emergent level and try to like really hammer on those conventional skills, a lot of them end up hating reading, which is just such a tragedy.
absolutely. You
And
know,
then, and then talk, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just, I just wanted to bounce off of that. And, you know, then our students moved to middle school and high school and still have not had it's still at maybe at that emergent level because sometimes it
Hmm.
takes a little longer and that's
Hmm.
okay. It doesn't mean we give up. It doesn't mean that
Right.
because they're 18, 14 or 18 years old and they still are, needing these skills to be taught at this emergent level doesn't mean that we don't do that, right? It means that we have to work harder. And it means that, we don't, I'm looking at creating some modules for SETC and for older learners. And it's because it's, we have lots of examples of, brown bear of emergent reading, right? We know how to do that. And we have loads and loads of materials that have repetitive text and have these things that are kind of built into those emergent reading skills. And then we get to middle school and high school and our materials kind of go away, right? So I think that I just wanted to point out, so yes, and we still need to
Hmm.
have those. We need to keep doing this even at that middle and high school level.
Yeah, and what I love about the emergent reading is just like if I think about like my kids, how I read to them when they were little to get them engaged and excited and point out words, it's all of those same things. And, as an OT who works on, access skills and kind of just increasing engagement, I always try to figure out how to do, add a little bit of silly and crazy to my emergent reading activities, to my shared readings, so that it's engaging, and they
Yeah,
want to be there. They don't want to miss what's being heard.
right. Exactly. I want to be in your classroom, Heidi, when you go in as an OT. I just want to stop for a second and just recognize that as an OT who's working on comprehensive literacy. Okay, everybody heard that, right? So, and SLPs can work on comprehensive literacy, right? Us teachers, we got it. We know it, right? Special education teachers in the classroom, we're there. This is our thing, right? We're doing this. But having our OT, speech, PT, vision, having all of the peoples come in and work on emergent literacy together just makes that even more powerful. I mean, that's just
Hmm.
so I love that you're there and doing that. So I want to come in and soak it all up. Before we move on, and go on, did you want to, so you had asked if people wanted to share some things out. Heidi, do you want to share what Jennifer, shared?
Sure. Sorry, I missed that in the chat here.
That's all right. I can share it too.
So Jennifer says after 30 years of teaching high school life skills, she's changing over from sight word-based reading to making words using Retopia. Her students are making progress and they're excited to read the book. We are reading Treasure Island. We have up a treasure map where we are mapping out the setting. Awesome. That is so cool.
Love it. Love it. I did
Um,
that book as well, and it's so fun. So
and Joan feels like she doesn't have anything at middle school. Retopia is a really nice option. I think looking at, you know, I'm not sure if SETSI's going to be able to kind of give some license out again next year or not, but that might be a way to, at least get it in the door.
yeah,
Um,
tried out.
and the other thing is if you can work with your admin, Retopia is great about, it sounds like a Retopia advertisement.
I know.
Um, and Retopia is great about giving you a pilot that you can use for several months so that you can try it and you kind of collect some data and some outcomes. And so, working with your administrators to, hey, this is out there. There's not really a great tier 3 curriculum for my
Mhm.
students who need tier 3 supports in literacy. Could we try a pilot? And they're really good at working with you with that.
Yeah, but you don't have to wait to get Retopia. Like you don't have to wait to get that.
Right. You don't have to wait. Right.
You definitely don't have to wait. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but as special education teachers, we know how to write a lesson plan, right? We've been taught that. We know how to do this. So taking a book and that is age respectful and age appropriate, and then looking at the pieces within, that's how I started. Yeah, I did that for 2 years.
Yep.
Took some books that their peers were reading in their gen ed classrooms and went through, picked out parts of this group. That's why I only started with three, because it was a little overwhelming for me. But then looked at how could I do shared reading? How can I do an interactive reading with the whole group? How can I do emergent writing, right? How can you do these things? And you can. This is a talented bunch of people here that is very have the ability
Mhm.
to be able to take something and break that down. The guidelines and the book really are here. It is like which it's possible to do.
Mhm.
So I'm hoping, I'm excited that we can maybe bring some more of that in with Setsi. So um,
Yeah, and I know that our teachers who are even using Retopia, they will bring their own books in and use the principles from the comprehensive literacy book
yeah.
to work on those. So they work for everything. Yep,
Yeah, the book was always sitting on my
you're not
desk.
just stuck.
Yeah, yeah, you're not stuck. It may be a little trickier, but you're not stuck. So let's keep going into shared reading. So, I wanted to bring this out. This is on page 51. And, Heidi, you and I had talked about this earlier today because it's kind of this is tricky, right? So, shared reading, we know, is that single most important activity to develop that knowledge, right? Required for success to be a successful reader. And we know that through the science, we know that through the research on the Commission of Reading, right? That 2000 commission. So, and in the book, then it talks about shared reading in two different ways. It talks about this highly structured version and this less structured version. And it's like, well, look at this. We have a highly structured version with individuals with ASD, and we have a less structured approach that worked with individuals with Rett syndrome. So how can that be? So which one? Which one do I do? And so Heidi and I, we talked about this, and one of the things we wanted to just kind of mention is that it means that you need to know your learners, right? You need to know your learners. You need to know, and then we have some this book gives some research. There's lots of research out there on ASD and shared reading. There's some research out there on Rett syndrome and what that looks like and those readers. And sometimes I think even like looking at, and I've worked with children with Rett syndrome, and sometimes the anxiety that is there that ends up coming up with the wait time, all the things that happen with Rett's. And sometimes that less structured approach really works well. And maybe, with ASD, I can see where a highly structured approach would work well. It's very rote, it's very synchronized, it's very established. Kids know exactly what's going to be coming next, and that can be very settling for kids on the spectrum. So it really comes down to like knowing your learner, right? Yeah. Anything you wanted to add to that, Heidi?
Nope, I think you've got it.
Okay. All right. So let's move along. So, all right. So, one of the biggest pieces that they talk about in this section is really looking at, okay, so how are you going to go through this? And when I first read about CAR, which is common ask question, common ask respond, and was like, well, I did that with my kids when I was reading to my children when they were little, right? We would, make a comment, we'd look at the pictures, we'd point, I might ask a question, and then we had a little conversation with David Copenhaver a couple weeks ago. And Heidi, I know you wanted to chat about that.
Yeah. So I had listened to the conversation he was having, the chat where he talked about shared reading. And I was like, okay, this is perfect. I'm gonna go model this in a classroom tomorrow. And so I'm listening to him. I'm like, I always thought I was kind of pretty good at it. And then I'm listening to him talk about comment, and that basically your comment is just to kind of like invite some type of response.
Yeah.
And it's not a WH question. If we start off with our comment being like a WH question, we're testing them. We're not like, we're not just like commenting like, look. And then when you ask that question again, it might be like, look, or look at that, or, something like that. And then, and then again, responding. So I thought, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to do this. It is so hard to just stand there and be like, so I have this book and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. And I was like, I sort of like, look. And, everybody's like, and I was like, I think probably what definitely um, would have been better is, they talk about going through the book ahead of time and putting what word you're going to be using as your comment on each page. That definitely would have helped me because I was like flying by the seat of my pants. And we were happened to read the book Everybody Poops. So poop was in there a lot. So I'm like, look, poop. Everybody had poop on their AAC device. They're finding poop. And but anyway, so it was this was really hard. I think I want to jump to putting that crowd in the car and doing more of that, like, what do you think is going to happen next? Or what do you think about that? And it's really hard to change from that. And I think it's some growth that I still, you know, am going to be continuing to work on because, it's just different that coming up with how to get engagement. And sometimes when you've got students, there's students, we have so many, especially with our students with like, very, complex needs, whether they're complex sensory needs, complex physical, complex communication needs, who don't have a lot of life experience. And so when you're like saying, look, they're like, huh? And so a lot of times I'll do some type of like switch activity with my shared reading to start to build some of those experiences for them and to let them kind of learn and kind of play with like, oh, this is what commenting looks like. And so we've got a video I'm going to have Sharon show here. It's a young man who came to us during the pandemic at very complex medically, CVI, some hearing. So it came to us very complex. Nobody really knew what he could or couldn't do. And we had him just like, once a week, once every other week, depending on his health and the team's health. And so comes in and we're doing we have this program in our district called Art for All, and it revolves around a book. And so this is our wind unit. We're doing the spin art. And so he was coming in, we wanted to make sure he got to participate in that because his gen ed, his special ed class was doing that. And so we were reading the book. The book's called A Contest Between the Wind and the Sun. Does he even know what wind is? Does he even know, does he really have those concepts? And so I have my little wavy guy here with a switch, and we're playing with switch access. So none of this is like beautiful and perfect. But what I have on the step-by-step button up on the top that my friend Bernie is holding at his head um, was making comments about the wind. It's like so windy. The wind is really blowing. Ooh, that wind. And so I'm going to watch the video. Sometimes it's hard to hear the voice output switch, but on the very back, you can see the light up on the back of it if you watch closely. And I want you to just look at this and tell me what you think we learned about this young man during this quick 2 minutes of reading the story.
Start off with a guts and a swirl. Oh, look at him. He's oh man. He's so mad. He is blowing off with lots of wind. Lots of wind. There we go. Wind. Takes some effort to lift that hand. Good job, Jacob. Oh, windy. So windy. Here it comes again. So windy.
So you can see him activating the switch, making the comments.
Then It did blow and blow, yes. Then the sun peeked out from behind the cloud, warming it. Frosty ground, there's no wind. It is not windy right now. It will, let's see if it's going to be windy in a minute. The man on the road unbuttoned his coat. He lifted his voice and sang out loud. He's singing la 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 la. He can sing better than he should sing. The sun
So
grew
reading about the
brighter,
sun, and is he activating that switch?
brighter, brighter. The man began to feel so hot. He took off his coat and sat down in a shady spot. The wind returned and said to the sun, I puffed and I blew to the brim, but I could not force the man's coat from him. I can't imagine that you were able to either.
There we go. There goes our
It's
comment about the
blowing
wind.
and blowing. Let's make some wind here. We got your switch down. Oh,
So,
Yeah.
so you can unmute. What did we learn about that young man during that session?
Comments
Anybody
on
want to?
topic. Comments on
Very
topic.
good
He was
comments.
using wind comments when wind was happening in the book and no wind comments when it wasn't. And it seems like both of those switch access points looked good and voluntary and really and pretty like
Mhm.
effective for him. Like being able to comment and start the
Mhm.
ooh.
Yeah, he now uses his right elbow for his second switch. So he has a proximity switch at his head and his right elbow. Anything else we learned? He was definitely following and understanding the story. So I think beforehand, people were using those words that I dislike so much when they described him, those two words that are called solo, that are the words that I think need to go out of our education vocabulary. And what do you think about after the video? Is he one of those kids that you would use the so low? Is he that low? He's an amazing, smart little boy.
Absolutely.
And just the progress he's made in the last year and a half has just been shocking. But that's what kind of started unlocking it with that shared reading that time.
Well, and I love that, you said it was messy, like sometimes it is in the beginning. It's just messy. It's not perfect and it's not exact and it's just, but you could see it, like he was so proud of himself, like doing that activity and being able to choose between that. And he loved that wind. Like that was amazing. I want that toy. That toy looks fun.
Amazon.
All right.
Amazon and a power link.
The power link's a little expensive, but the toy I'll get for sure. Thanks for sharing that. Does anybody else have any comments or questions or compliments? I mean, Heidi, well done. It's hard and brave to show your stuff, right? And for people to critique it. And so yeah, thank you for doing that. I think that was really great. Okay, well, we're going to move on. The one thing I did want to mention before we move on is that what I've done here is I've given everybody a copy. I've created this visual support that I use for myself and for my parents and for everybody that comes into my classroom. So that we're always, if there's ever a moment for us to be able to do even a one-on-one shared activity, reading activity, or we're in the classroom and I'm doing it as a big group, that we have this there. So, so that's for you if you would like a visual support for that. Oops, what happened? Let's go back. Crowd is the part. You should have access. So Jennifer just asked, how do we have access to the visual support? So it's linked in this presentation, and Annie can, if Annie, you want to put the link to the presentation again into the chat, so everybody can have that to kind of refresh. Thanks, Annie. So it's right in there, and it's in the presentation. I think this is, I don't know, slide 20, maybe. I'm not sure how far we've gone in. Okay, so CROWD is looking, it's an acronym, right? Because in special ed, we got to love our acronyms. So putting CROWD in the car. So this is then an example, and what CROWD does is it gives you different levels of questions, right? So we're not just asking a yes and no question, right? It gives, when we're making that question back here in car, right? When we're asking that question, that we can give multiple different types of questions. Maybe not multiple all at the same time, because that's what I thought at first it was. And my poor kids were like, well, Redmond, why you ask me so many questions? And then realize, oh no, you just do one at a time. So we have completion, right? Leaving that blank and blank ending, right? Complete the sentence, kind of that recall about just what just happened, right? Open-ended questions that can have those, have a different, it just depends on what they're seeing, right? Part of that of the picture. The WH, the W are those WH questions, right? Typically focus on those
There is a
pictures.
place for them.
What's that? And there is a place
I
for
said,
them. Yes, there is a place for them. So don't give up on them, Heidi. There is a place for them. So maybe you're just your first crack car part when you're not putting the crowd in. That just looks a little different. But we do get into questions, right? That's part of that shared reading experience. And then that distancing, right? So that being able to have that self to text or self to world experience, being able to like, oh, I remember when I saw that puppy dog at the park. I have a dog too, right? So being able to make that bridge. So I just wanted to give you, this was an example in my classroom that we did when we were doing crowd. And I also put it in as part of our shared writing that we were doing as well. So here's an example of what completion would be. Like, I notice a lion, right? Open-ended questions, right? So what is a groan? What is a groan? Like here, I gave a sentence stem, which is different than having it closed, right? It is and we were working on building, right, that syntax, that sentence structure. But an open-ended question, what is a groan? And giving that structure for that support. And then WH questions, right? Which sometimes those two look about the same. Recall, well, we just watched this video of this lion, right? That was roaring. And so recall what was, whoa, what just happened? Right? Well, the lion was roaring, right? And then distance. Do you remember when we went to the zoo? I've seen a lion at a zoo. I've never seen a lion at home, but sometimes I have a cat, so I would have seen a cat at home. Do you remember in our story, which was The Wizard of Oz we were reading, right? Do you remember in our story? Oh, there's a lion in our story. Oh, yeah. They don't make good pets, do they? I mean, it just brings a whole nother start of that conversation. And that when you go back to car, that respond and give more, right? It bridges and it gives those opportunities. But Setsi has done some really, really great work within this area and has some really great literacy modules that I wanted to make sure that everyone knew about. So in here we have, I'm just showing you the emergent literacy model that's there. There's an emergent writing, and so we'll take a look at that next time. And then there's two other modules, which I'll show you here. Let me get down to the bottom. So we have our friend Brenda doing some work here with us. So we have 4 modules right now of this unlocking literacy, and it's really great to start out these universal tools and strategies. We have alphabet and phonological awareness, and then emergent reading, which we're working on now. So the modules are self-paced. They have links to outside different modules from all over the US in different centers, different things that are happening out there to give you that opportunity to expand your learning. And I think what is also really great about these modules, and I would use them with when I was working with my paraeducators and giving them more opportunities to learn more about what is this shared reading, what is this self-select reading, what is this with emergent reading. And then they could go when they had time. Let's say their student left early for an hour for the day. They have about a half an